The most dangerous moment in your financial life isn't the day something goes wrong. It's the day your safety net felt finished. Emergency fund done, retirement account growing, insurance active, debt shrinking. You looked at that list one day and felt something rare in this economy, calm, the sense that you'd built something real, something that would hold when the world stopped cooperating. What nobody told you is that the standard financial safety net checklist was designed to help you feel protected, not necessarily to make you protected. And there is a difference between those two things that most people only discover under pressure, at exactly the moment when fixing it is no longer an option. There are three structural gaps in the way most Americans build financial security. They don't announce themselves. They don't appear in your balance sheet, your benefits summary, or your coverage documents. They only become visible the moment you need your protection to hold, which is precisely when you can no longer seal them. And every financially responsible person reading this almost certainly has at least one of these gaps right now without knowing it. Think about how a house is framed. Every wall looks roughly the same from the inside: studs, drywall, a coat of paint. But some of those walls are holding the weight of the roof. Remove a decorative wall and nothing happens. Remove a load-bearing wall, even carefully, even with good intentions, and the ceiling doesn't negotiate. Financial protection works exactly this way. Most people build what looks like a solid structure, multiple walls, each one carefully placed. What the checklist never tells you is which walls in your plan are actually load-bearing, because when a real crisis arrives, it doesn't start with the decorative ones. The first gap is the one that hides inside the thing that feels most secure. Think about everything protecting you financially right now: your income, your health insurance, your disability coverage, your 401k employer match. 4 separate protections, 4 separate walls. Now answer this honestly: how many of those 4 things are connected to the exact same employer? For most Americans, the answer is all 4, which means what looks like 4 separate walls is actually one wall, one load-bearing wall, one single point of failure. A single layoff, not a catastrophe, not a business failure, just a layoff, removes all 4 protections at once. Income stops, health coverage ends, disability insurance disappears, retirement contributions halt simultaneously. And the emergency fund, which was designed to carry 3 to 6 months, now has to carry something closer to 12 to 18. Because rebuilding all 4 of those protections, finding new coverage, stabilizing income, restarting contributions doesn't happen in the same timeline as finding a new job. The math doesn't balance. The safety net doesn't hold the weight it was supposed to hold because it was never actually 4 walls. It was 4 panels of the same wall. This is what financial planners call employer concentration risk, and it is nearly universal in the middle-class American financial plan. Not because people are careless, because the standard checklist doesn't ask about it. The second gap is quieter and in some ways more counterintuitive. Imagine you have $200,000 in total assets, retirement accounts, home equity, long-term investments. On paper, that's a real number, one that represents years of discipline and sacrifice. Now imagine a $20,000 emergency lands on your doorstep Thursday. Medical, legal, a job disruption that doesn't wait for loan approvals or market conditions or paperwork processing windows. If $180,000 of your total assets sit in a 401k, a home, and instruments that carry penalties, tax consequences, or multi-week delays, then in that moment you are not wealthy, you are asset-locked. There is a word for this condition: broke, not poor, not struggling. Broke, meaning the money exists but it cannot move when you need it to move. This is the second load-bearing wall most financial plans get wrong. They optimize for growth, for making the total number larger, while accidentally neglecting the distribution of accessible weight within the structure. A plan that accumulates assets in a liquid forms doesn't build a stronger house. It builds a heavier ceiling over walls that were never reinforced to hold it. The metric that matters here isn't net worth. It's your personal liquidity ratio, the percentage of your total assets accessible within 72 hours without penalty. Most responsible Americans who calculate that number for the first time are genuinely surprised, not because they did anything wrong, because nobody asked them to check. The third gap is the most invisible, because it hides inside a document you already have. Think about when you last reviewed your insurance coverage, not when you last paid the premium, when you last looked at what it actually covers. For most people, that review happened during a specific life event, a new job, a new home, a new dependent. The policy was built to reflect who you were at that moment, the income you earned then, the assets you held then, the obligations you carried at that time. Your life has changed since then. Your income may have doubled, you may have purchased property, you likely have more people depending on you now than the coverage was designed to protect. But the policy doesn't update itself. No alert fires when your coverage levels become inadequate by a factor of 2 or 3. No notification arrives when the wall that was built for a 34-year-old renter is still the only wall standing between your family and a worst-case scenario, while your actual life has outgrown it entirely. This is insurance lag, and it is not a problem of negligence, it's a problem of design. Insurance is built to be purchased and maintained passively. Financial safety net checklists treat coverage as a box to check, not a structure to maintain. So years pass, the house gets bigger, and the load-bearing wall is still rated for the house you lived in before. Here is what makes these 3 financial protection gaps genuinely dangerous, and this is the part that most financial content glosses over entirely. They don't operate independently, they operate as a cascade. A layoff triggers Gap 1, all 4 protections disappear simultaneously. The emergency fund, which was supposed to be the backup, now carries a load it was never built for. Gap 2 means that even with substantial total assets, your actual liquid position may cover 3 months, not the 12 you actually need. And Gap 3 means the insurance you've been relying on to bridge the rest was written for a version of your life that no longer exists. None of these gaps alone would collapse the structure. Together, under real pressure, they create something architects call a progressive failure, a sequence where each failing wall removes the support that the next one depended on. This is precisely why the standard checklist doesn't protect against them. The checklist evaluates walls individually. Real crises test the structure as a whole. And here is the truth that reframes everything. None of this is complicated to fix. Each gap has a specific practical correction, and none of them require starting over. Gap 1, employer concentration, is addressed through one deliberate shift, building individual protections that don't share the employer foundation, an emergency reserve that functions independently of your benefit structure, an individual disability policy that travels with you, not with your job, a health coverage bridge designed to function during transition periods, because gaps in income and gaps in coverage rarely arrive on separate timelines. Gap 2, liquidity misalignment, is addressed by running a single calculation. Divide your accessible assets, cash, liquid savings, penalty-free reserves by your monthly essential expenses. If that number is below 4, you know exactly how much rebalancing is needed, not dramatic rebalancing, precise rebalancing. Moving a portion of long-term accumulation into accessible positions doesn't reduce your financial security. It distributes the weight more intelligently across the structure. Gap 3, insurance lag, is addressed with one annual review that requires no financial advisor. Pull your current coverage amounts. Compare them against your current income, your current assets, and the number of people currently depending on you. If those numbers don't align with the life you're actually living, you are protecting a house that no longer exists with walls that were built for it. The people who are genuinely financially secure, not just financially organized, aren't people who found better products or higher returns. They're people who understand their structure, who know which walls are load-bearing, who have identified their single points of failure before those failures became failures, not because they panicked, because they checked. The checklist you completed was the beginning of a sound financial safety net. But a checklist is a list of walls. Real financial security is knowing which ones carry the weight and making sure each one has a second foundation beneath it before the ground shifts. Run the audit, check the employer concentration, calculate the liquidity ratio, pull the insurance numbers, 3 conversations, 3 corrections. None of them take longer than a focused afternoon. And there is one more structural gap that doesn't appear on any standard financial planning checklist, one that operates at a level most personal finance content never reaches. That's what we're covering next.